The first time I felt his eyes on me, I mistook the sensation for a chill in the autumn air. Pine needles crunched beneath my boots as I gathered herbs at the forest's edge, the late afternoon sun filtering through branches in hazy golden shafts. The scent of earth and decay filled my nostrils, nature returning to itself, the eternal cycle that had always brought me comfort. Until that day, a snap of twigs, too deliberate to be the wind, the forest went silent in a way that made the fine hairs at the nape of my neck stand on end. Even the birds stopped their chatter, as if holding their breath. I froze, my fingers still clutching a sprig of wild rosemary, the silver pendant my grandmother had given me. A small wolf with amber eyes felt suddenly heavy against my chest. Her words echoed in my mind. Our family has always lived at the edge, Clara. We know the forest, but we respect its secrets. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed. The boundary lay somewhere behind me now, crossed without my knowing. I turned slowly, basket clutched to my chest like a shield. Nothing. Just shadows between trees growing longer as the day bled away, but something was there. Something watched. I hurried back toward the village, trying not to look like prey in flight. The strange feeling followed me all the way to the edge of town, then vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. That night, I dreamt of amber eyes and running until my lungs burned. 3 days later, they found Mia. She'd gone missing from her bed, the window left open despite the autumn chill. They discovered her wandering at dawn, barefoot and disoriented at the forest's edge, with no memory of how she'd gotten there. She keeps saying someone was calling to her. Mrs. Hannity whispered in the village square, not realizing I could hear her. Poor thing's mind is addled with fever now. I visited Mia that afternoon, bringing a tea of elderflower and mint that my grandmother had taught me to brew for clarity of mind. Her mother let me in reluctantly. My family's knowledge of herbal remedies was respected, but regarded with suspicion. Too many generations of Blackwood women living alone at the forest's edge had bred rumors that never quite died. Mia lay pale against her pillows, blonde hair, a shade darker than my own, spread out like a fan. Her eyes fluttered open when I set the cup on her nightstand. "Clara," she whispered, reaching for my hand. Her fingers burned with fever. "You believe me, don't you?" I squeezed her hand. "Of course I do." There was a voice, in my dreams, calling me to the trees. Her eyes darted to the window, now firmly latched. But it wasn't just a voice. It was a pull. Like a rope tied around my heart, I thought of the watching eyes in the forest, the silence that had fallen. "What did the voice say?" I asked. Her gaze grew distant. That it was time. That we're not alone anymore. A shiver ran through her. "Clara, I think something's coming for us." I stayed until she drifted back to sleep, troubled by her words and the racing of my own thoughts. As the only 2 girls in the village who had turned 18 this year, we had always shared a connection. If something had called to Mia, would it call to me too? That night, more villagers reported hearing strange sounds from the forest, howls that didn't quite sound like wolves. Too melodic, almost like singing. Old Man Turner swore he'd seen eyes reflecting in the darkness beyond his farm, too high off the ground to be any natural creature. The village council called an emergency meeting. I stood at the back of the town hall, watching as Mayor Halston tried to calm the rising panic. "We'll send word to the capital for assistance," he announced, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Until then, no one is to enter the forest alone. No one is to be outside after dark." My thoughts turned to my small cottage, inherited from my grandmother. It stood closer to the forest than any other home in the village. I would be alone tonight, with only the trees and whatever lurked among them for company. As the meeting dispersed, Sheriff Wells caught my arm. His weathered face was creased with concern. "Clara, perhaps you should stay in the village tonight. Mrs. Abernathy has a spare room." I shook my head. My home has stood at the forest's edge for generations. No Blackwood has ever abandoned it out of fear. His frown deepened. "Your grandmother was a wise woman, but even she would tell you there's a difference between courage and foolishness." "I'll be fine," I insisted, touching the wolf pendant at my throat. "The cottage has strong doors." As I walked home in the fading light, the weight of many gazes followed me, the concerned looks of villagers who had always seen my family as different, as other. Not quite belonging to their world, yet not fully part of the wilderness either, always at the edge. I locked my door as the last light died from the sky, drawing the curtains tight against the night. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing dancing shadows across the walls lined with dried herbs and my grandmother's books. I should have felt safe here, in this place of memory and knowledge. Instead, I found myself listening to every creak of the old wooden beams, every whisper of wind through the eaves. Sleep evaded me. I lay in bed watching moonlight create silver patterns on my ceiling, wondering what had called to Mia, what had watched me from the trees. The howls began just after midnight. They started distant, a haunting chorus that rose and fell like a tide of sound. Beautiful and terrible all at once, unlike anything I'd ever heard before. Not quite wolf, not quite human. Something in between that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. They grew closer as the night deepened, surrounding my cottage in a circle of sound. I sat up, heart pounding against my ribs like a caged bird. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the howls ceased. The silence that followed was worse somehow. A soft thud against my front door made me jump, then another. Something was out there, testing the strength of my locks. I reached for the iron poker by my bed. A poor weapon, but better than nothing. "Who's there?" I called, hating the tremor in my voice. No answer came, but the pressure against the door stopped. For a moment, I thought whatever it was had gone. Then came a new sound, scratching at my window, slow, deliberate. Not the random scrape of branches, but the careful pattern of something intelligent. I backed away, poker clutched in white-knuckled hands. The window latch began to rattle. In that moment, terror gave way to a strange, calm clarity. This cottage had protected Blackwood women for generations. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. The forest has its secrets, and so do we. I moved to the fireplace and grabbed a handful of powder from a clay jar on the mantel. My grandmother's special mixture of salt, dried rowan berries, and herbs she never named. With a whispered prayer, I cast it into the flames. The fire roared up, suddenly burning blue and bright. A shockwave of heat pulsed outward, and from outside came a startled yelp, followed by silence. I stood trembling in the center of my cottage, poker still in hand, waiting, but nothing more came. No scratching, no howls, no pressure against the door. Just the night, holding its breath. When dawn finally broke, I opened my door cautiously. On the threshold lay a single black rose, its petals impossibly perfect, its stem free of thorns. A gift? A warning? I couldn't tell. But as I picked it up, I noticed marks in the soft earth around my cottage, paw prints too large to belong to any normal wolf. I decided then that I needed answers. The village would huddle in fear, waiting for help that might never come. But I was a Blackwood woman. We had always lived at the edge, had always understood that knowledge was the only true protection. My grandmother's most precious book, bound in faded green leather, its pages covered in her cramped handwriting, held generations of observations about the forest and its mysteries. I had never read it completely. Some passages were written in a language I didn't recognize, but now I searched its pages with renewed purpose. There, buried in a section about the old stories, I found a reference to the change, a time when the forest would reclaim what was given. The words made little sense, but a crude drawing beside them caught my attention. A circle of wolf-like creatures surrounding a human figure with pale hair. My fingers trembled as they traced the image. The village bell rang out, breaking my concentration. 3 sharp peals, the signal for another emergency meeting. I tucked the small book into my pocket and hurried toward the square. A crowd had already gathered, faces tight with fear and lack of sleep. Mayor Halston stood on the steps of the town hall, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. 2 more gone, he announced without preamble. The Davis children. Their bedroom window was found open this morning, just like with Mia. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. The Davis twins were only 16, a boy and a girl with the same wheat blonde hair as mine and Mia's. The Capitol has sent word, the mayor continued. Help will arrive in 3 days' time." 3 days! Someone shouted. "We could all be taken by then." Panic rippled through the gathering. I noticed a pattern forming. Mia, now the twins, young people with fair hair, called into the night. Sheriff Wells raised his hands for quiet. "Until help arrives, no one stays alone. We'll double the patrols, board up windows, keep your children close." As the meeting disbanded into frightened clusters, I approached the sheriff, the Davis twins. They both have light hair, like Mia, like me. His eyes narrowed as he considered this. "You think that's what connects them? I don't know. But it seems..." Before I could finish, commotion erupted at the edge of the square. A stranger was walking into our village, a tall man with dark hair and features so perfect they seemed almost carved. He moved with unnatural grace, his long coat flowing behind him despite the lack of wind. The crowd parted before him like water. Something about him sent a shock of recognition through me, though I was certain I'd never seen him before. The pendant against my chest grew warm. The stranger stopped in the center of the square, scanning the faces of the villagers until his eyes, amber like autumn leaves, locked with mine. The world seemed to tilt and narrow, everything else falling away. In that moment, I knew with bone-deep certainty that he was what had been watching me in the forest. He smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. "I've come for what belongs to us," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed square, "the children of the old promise." Mayor Halston stepped forward, visibly trembling but determined. "We don't know what you're talking about. Leave our village in peace." The stranger's gaze never left mine. "Ask the lass Blackwood. She carries the mark." He gestured to my pendant. Her grandmother understood the pact. All eyes turned to me. I clutched my grandmother's wolf pendant, confusion and a strange sense of betrayal washing over me. What had my grandmother known? What hadn't she told me? "Where are the Davis children?" Sheriff Wells demanded, moving protectively toward me. "Safe," the stranger replied. "Safer than they would be here when the change comes." His eyes softened slightly as they remained fixed on me, as will she be. "She's not going anywhere," the sheriff growled, reaching for his gun. In a movement too fast to follow, the stranger was suddenly beside me, his hand gripping my wrist. The touch sent electricity racing up my arm. "You feel it, don't you?" he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "The call of what you truly are." Before anyone could react, he pulled me against his chest. "She comes with me now. Try to follow, and you will not be shown mercy." The last thing I saw as he carried me away was the stunned faces of the villagers, frozen in disbelief and horror. Then the world blurred around me, trees rushing past at impossible speed, the ground falling away beneath us as I was carried into the heart of the forest by something that wore a man's shape, but moved like the wind itself. "Let me go!" I struggled against his iron grip, terror and rage battling within me. He finally stopped in a small clearing, setting me on my feet, but maintaining his hold on my wrist. Up close, his beauty was even more unsettling, too perfect, too predatory. "You're not safe with me," he growled, his amber eyes flashing with something like regret. "But you're even less safe without me now." "What are you?" I whispered, though part of me already knew the answer. His smile was all teeth. "I am Griffin, Alpha King of the Northern Packs, and you, Clara Blackwood, are coming home," claimed. "Home?" I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. "That village is my home, the home you just dragged me from." Griffin's expression darkened, his perfect features arranging themselves into something cold and ancient. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath. "That village has never been your home. It's been your cage." He released my wrist, stepping back as if confident I wouldn't, or couldn't, run. "Your grandmother knew this day would come. She was supposed to prepare you." I rubbed my wrist where his fingers had left marks. Not bruises, but something like heat imprints. "My grandmother taught me many things. Abduction by mythical creatures wasn't among the lessons." A sound escaped him, something between a growl and a laugh. "Not mythical, just hidden. There's a difference." The clearing we stood in began to fill with shadows emerging silently from between the trees. People, or things that looked like people at first glance. As they drew closer, I could see what set them apart, eyes that caught the light like animals, movements too fluid to be human, an otherworldly stillness when they chose not to move at all. My breath quickened as they formed a loose circle around us. Some were fully human in appearance, while others seemed caught between forms, elongated fingers ending in claws, ears slightly pointed, teeth that gleamed too sharp when they parted their lips. Griffin watched my reaction carefully. "My pack," he said simply. "And soon, yours." A woman stepped forward from the circle, her dark hair falling in a curtain to her waist. Unlike Griffin's cold perfection, her beauty was wild, untamed. "Is this her?" she asked, circling me with predatory grace. "She doesn't look like much, certainly doesn't smell like one of us." "She hasn't turned yet, Sarah," Griffin replied. "But she will. Her bloodline is one of the strongest." "And if she doesn't survive the change?" Sarah's voice held challenge rather than concern. Griffin's eyes flashed, and Sarah immediately lowered her gaze, tilting her head to expose her neck in a gesture that seemed both ancient and instinctive. "She'll survive," he said, with such certainty that even I almost believed him. I took advantage of their exchange to glance around the clearing, calculating my chances of escape. The forest beyond the circle of wolf people was dense, unfamiliar. Even if I somehow broke through their ranks, how far could I run before they caught me? Creatures that moved as Griffin had, faster than my eyes could track. I wouldn't make it 10 yards. As if reading my thoughts, Griffin's attention snapped back to me. "Don't," he warned softly. "If you run, instinct takes over, and we hunt." A shiver ran down my spine at the hunger that flickered across more than one face in the circle. They were restraining themselves, I realized, because he commanded it. "Where are the Davis twins?" I asked, forcing strength into my voice. "And Mia? What have you done with them?" "Nothing they didn't want," came a familiar voice. The circle parted, and Mia stepped forward. But she wasn't the Mia I knew. This Mia moved with newfound confidence. Her formerly gentle features sharpened, her eyes now the same unnatural amber as Griffin's. Behind her stood the Davis twins, similarly transformed, their blonde hair the only feature that remained unchanged. "Mia," I whispered. "What happened to you?" She smiled, revealing teeth slightly too pointed. "I changed, Clara. I became what I was always meant to be." She approached me, taking my hands in hers. Her skin burned hotter than when she'd had fever. "It hurts, but only for a little while. And then you're free." "Free?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're not free. You've been kidnapped, changed somehow. This isn't you." Her smile faltered. "It's the real me. It is, underneath what the village made me be." She squeezed my hands. "Don't you feel it sometimes? Like you don't quite fit? Like there's something inside you straining to get out?" I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. Because she was right. I had always felt different, apart. Not just because of my family's reputation, but something deeper. A restlessness that came over me during full moons, dreams of running through forests I'd never visited. The strange comfort I took in the wolf pendant that had been passed down through generations of Blackwood women. "Your grandmother was one of us," Griffin said, watching the emotions play across my face. "She chose to live among humans, to raise your mother there. But the blood remains. It calls." I pulled my hands from Mia's grasp, anger flaring hot within me. "If what you say is true, why didn't my grandmother tell me? Why keep it secret if this was some grand destiny?" Griffin's expression hardened. "Ask her yourself." "She's dead," I snapped. "Is she?" His smile was knowing, infuriating. Before I could demand what he meant, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my attention. The crowd parted once more as a slender figure approached, leaning on a gnarled walking stick. Silver hair cascaded down her back, and though her face was lined with age, her amber eyes were bright and alert. Eyes I would know anywhere. "Grandmother?" The word escaped me in a breathless whisper. The old woman who had supposedly died in her sleep 3 winters ago stood before me, very much alive. She looked both exactly as I remembered, and somehow more vibrant, more present, more herself. "Hello, my little wolf cub," she said, her her voice the same warm rasp that had told me stories by the fireplace. "I've missed you terribly." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I staggered backward, only to find Griffin's hand at my elbow, steadying me. I jerked away from his touch. "You're dead," I said flatly. "I buried you." My grandmother smiled sadly. "You buried an empty coffin, filled with stones to give it weight." It was time for me to return to the pack. I had stayed away too long already. "You abandoned me?" The hurt in my voice was naked, raw. She stepped closer, and I caught her familiar scent, pine and rosemary, and something wild underneath. "I left to protect you, to give you time to grow strong enough for the change. I never abandoned you. I watched over you from the forest, made sure you were safe." The eyes I felt watching me, I realized. That was you? Sometimes me, sometimes others from the pack. Her gaze flicked briefly to Griffin. "Sometimes our king." I turned to stare at Griffin, the pieces clicking into place. "You've been watching me for years?" He met my gaze without apology. "Since you turned 16, when the first signs appeared." "What signs?" I demanded, though a part of me already knew. "Your dreams of running," my grandmother answered for him. "The way animals respond to you, your affinity for the forest, the way you heal faster than you should." She gestured to my hand, and I remembered the deep cut I'd received last month while gathering herbs. A cut that should have left a scar, but had healed without a trace. "Why now?" I asked. "Why take me now, after all this time?" Griffin stepped forward. "Because the hunter's moon approaches. The only time when those of mixed blood can undergo the change and survive. We've waited generations for this moment, for enough of the old bloodlines to come of age together." "The fair-haired children," I murmured. My grandmother nodded. 5 families made the pact, centuries ago. 5 human women who bore children to werewolf fathers, creating bloodlines that could bridge both worlds. Every century when the stars align, their descendants can choose to reclaim their heritage. "Choose?" I seized on the word. "So I have a choice?" A heavy silence fell over the clearing. Griffin and my grandmother exchanged a look that sent ice through my veins. "Not anymore," Griffin said finally. "The choice was taken from us all when the hunters returned." "Hunters?" The word sent a ripple of tension through the watching pack. "They've been tracking us for months," Sarah spoke up, her voice tight with barely contained fury. "They've already killed the Western pack. We're the last sanctuary for those with the old blood." My grandmother's face was grim. "The same hunters who drove us into hiding centuries ago have returned. They can sense the awakening bloodlines. That's why we had to bring you here now. They were closing in on the village. The help the mayor sent for," I realized with growing horror. "They're not coming to protect us from you. They're coming to kill us all." Griffin nodded. 3 days, your mayor said? That's how long we have to complete the change before they arrive. Those who haven't turned by then." His voice trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Death awaited those caught in between. I wrapped my arms around myself, mind racing. Everything I had believed about my life, my family, my very identity, had been torn away in the space of an hour, and now I was being told that my only chance of survival was to become something other than human. "I need to think," I said, my voice small but steady. "I need time." "Time is the one thing we don't have," Griffin replied, though something like sympathy flickered in his amber eyes. "She deserves to understand what she's becoming," my grandmother interceded, placing a weathered hand on Griffin's arm. A familiarity that suggested her standing in the pack was higher than her age might indicate. "One night. Give her until tomorrow's sunset." Griffin's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "One night. No more." He turned to the gathered pack. "Sarah will show you where you'll sleep. You are not a prisoner, but—" His eyes locked with mine. "Remember my warning. If you run, we hunt, and we're not the only predators in these woods now." As the pack dispersed, Mia approached me once more. "It's not so bad, Clara," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "It hurts, and then it's beautiful. Like breaking out of a shell you never knew was too small." I wanted to be angry with her for not telling me the truth from the beginning, but the genuine happiness radiating from her was impossible to dismiss. This wasn't a captive speaking under duress. This was my friend, transformed, but somehow more authentically herself than I'd ever seen her. Sarah led me to a small cabin nestled among the trees. The pack, it seemed, was not as primitive as I had imagined. Their settlement was a collection of cabins and larger communal structures, hidden deep within the forest where human eyes never ventured. "Don't make him come looking for you," Sarah advised as she left me at the cabin door. "He's been waiting for you for a long time. His patience is limited." Inside, the cabin was simple but comfortable. A bed with furs, a small fireplace already lit, a basin of water for washing. A set of clean clothes lay folded on a wooden chest, nothing locked. No barriers to escape except the promise of fangs in the darkness. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over my grandmother's pendant. All those stories she'd told me of wolves and forests, of ancient packs and moon magic. They hadn't been metaphors or fairy tales. They'd been history. My history. Night fell quickly in the dense forest. I watched through the cabin's small window as the pack gathered around a central bonfire. Their movements became less human as darkness descended, more fluid and primal, some fully transformed before my eyes. Bodies contorting, fur spreading across skin in a transformation that looked agonizing, yet was endured in near silence. Griffin remained in human form, his tall figure casting a long shadow as he moved among his pack. Occasionally his gaze would lift to my window, as if he could sense me watching. Each time, something hot and unfamiliar curled in my stomach. Later, a soft knock at my door revealed my grandmother, bearing a tray of food. "You must be hungry," she said, setting it down on a small table. "I'm not sure I can eat," I admitted, though the scent of hearty stew made my stomach growl traitorously. She smiled. "Your body knows what it needs, even if your mind is still catching up." She sat beside me as I reluctantly began to eat. "You have questions. Ask them while we have privacy." I had 100 questions, but one burned brightest. "Why did you leave me?" "The real reason." Pain flashed across her weathered features. "To draw the hunters away from you. They can sense our kind, even those who haven't turned. I feared they had caught my scent, that they would track it back to you before you were ready." She took my hand, her skin warm and familiar. "I left to keep you safe, to lead them away. I never stopped watching over you." "And Griffin? What is he to you? To me?" Something like amusement flickered in her eyes. "Griffin is king because his bloodline is the oldest, the purest. He has led the northern pack since his father was killed by hunters 20 years ago." "That's not what I asked," she sighed. "No, it isn't. Griffin has watched over you because it's his duty to protect all potential pack members, but also because—" She hesitated. "Because among our kind, certain souls recognize each other across time, across transformations. The human word would be mate, though that simplifies something far more complex." Heat rushed to my face. "You're saying he thinks I'm his, that we're—" "I'm saying nothing is certain until after the change," she interrupted gently. "What you choose then will be your choice. But yes, he has felt the pull toward you. It's why he was so insistent on bringing you here himself." "I don't even know him," I protested. "Don't you?" she asked softly. "Think of your dreams, Clara. The ones you never told me about but I knew you had. The ones where you were running beside a great black wolf with eyes like amber fire." I stared at her, speechless. Those dreams had been coming since I was 16. Dreams so vivid I would wake with my heart racing and the phantom sensation of wind in my hair, of freedom without boundaries. "Rest now," she said, rising. "Tomorrow you'll need your strength." After she left, I lay awake listening to the distant sounds of the pack, howls and laughter intermingling in the darkness. Part of me still wanted to run, to deny this new reality. But another part, a part I'd kept buried, wanted to join that wild chorus under the stars. Dawn broke with a silence that felt unnatural after the night's wild chorus. I had slept fitfully, dreams filled with running and shifting forms, and amber eyes that seemed to peer into my very soul. When I finally gave up on rest and stepped outside the cabin, the settlement appeared deserted, except for a few figures moving about the communal areas. One of them was my grandmother, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle outside a larger cabin that seemed to serve as some kind of infirmary. Her eyes lifted to meet mine as I approached. "You look like you haven't slept," she observed. I wonder why, I replied dryly, sitting beside her on a rough-hewn bench. Where is everyone? Hunting, gathering strength. Her hands never paused in their rhythmic grinding. The change requires energy, and afterward the hunger is substantial. I shuddered, not wanting to think too deeply about what or who might be hunted. These hunters you mentioned, who are they? My grandmother's expression darkened. They call themselves purifiers, humans who believe our kind are abominations, demons in flesh. They've hunted us for centuries, nearly drove us to extinction once. She scooped the crushed herbs into a leather pouch. They use silver weapons, wolfsbane poison, and worst of all, they have trackers among them, humans with the ability to sense our kind, even at a distance. But if they've hunted you for centuries, why are they suddenly focusing on our village now? Because of the convergence. What happens when 5 bloodlines come of age during a hunter's moon? It only occurs once every century. She turned to face me fully. The power released during multiple changes calls to them like a beacon. And to make matters worse, the Davis twins' father raised an alarm when they disappeared. He has connections to the purifiers, though I doubt he knows what his children truly are. Cold dread settled in the pit of my stomach. So they're coming for all of us. The pack, the newly turned, me. Yes, but we won't be easily taken. She patted my hand. Griffin has been preparing for this for years. The pack is stronger under his leadership than it has been for generations. At the mention of his name, a tingle ran down my spine. Where is he? Securing the perimeter with the strongest warriors. She gave me a knowing look that made heat rise to my cheeks. He'll return by midday. I changed the subject quickly. The hunters will reach the village first. What about the other villagers? They're innocent in all this. My grandmother's expression softened. Your concern for them does you credit, Clara. But the purifiers don't typically harm ordinary humans unless they stand in the way. They want us. Typically, I pressed. She sighed. There have been incidents. Times when their zealotry blinded them to distinctions. In other words, they might slaughter the entire village looking for werewolves. The thought made me sick. I should warn them, I said, rising to my feet. They need to know what's coming. My grandmother caught my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. And tell them what? That werewolves have taken their children? That the monsters from their nightmares are real? They'll think you've lost your mind, or worse, that you've been bewitched. I have to try something, I insisted. I can't just hide in the forest while they're massacred. Before she could respond, a commotion rose from the edge of the settlement. Wolves in human form rushed into the clearing, carrying something between them. As they drew closer, I saw it was a man, bloody, barely conscious. Tracker, someone hissed, and the word rippled through the gathering pack like a physical blow. My grandmother pulled me toward the infirmary cabin. Stay back, she warned, but I ignored her, moving closer to see. The injured man was laid on a table. He was young, perhaps in his 20s, with cropped brown hair and a face that might have been handsome if not contorted in pain. A deep gash ran across his chest, still bleeding freely. Griffin entered behind the group, his expression thunderous. He had partially shifted, claws extending from his fingertips, eyes glowing with inner fire, features sharpened beyond human limits. Found him in the Eastern Valley, reported one of the wolves who had carried him in. He was alone, but there were signs of others nearby. They're here already? My voice cut through the tense atmosphere. All eyes turned to me, including Griffin's burning gaze. A scouting party, he answered, his voice deeper, rougher in his half-shifted state. The main force is still a day away, but they move faster than we anticipated. I stepped closer to the wounded man. Despite myself, I felt pity. He couldn't be much older than me, and his pain was evident. What will you do with him? Question him, Griffin replied flatly. Then decide. The implication was clear. My stomach turned, but I forced my voice to remain steady. Let me help with his wounds first. Griffin's eyes narrowed. Why would you help someone who has come to destroy us? To destroy you? Because I'm not a monster. I shot back. No matter what I might become tonight. Something flickered in his expression. Anger, then reluctant respect. He inclined his head slightly. Tend to him if you must, but he remains bound, and you will not be alone with him. My grandmother brought her herbs and supplies, and together, we cleaned and dressed the tracker's wounds. He remained semi-conscious, occasionally muttering words I couldn't understand. Up close, I noticed a silver medallion around his neck, embossed with a symbol of a flame. The mark of the purifiers, my grandmother explained, seeing my gaze. Each tracker earns it differently, but all of them can sense our kind. When we finished, Griffin dismissed most of the others, keeping only Sarah and 2 large warriors nearby. He approached the table where the tracker lay. "He'll wake soon," my grandmother said, wiping blood from her hands. "The wound looks worse than it is." Griffin nodded. "Leave us." My grandmother departed without argument, but I hesitated. "I want to stay," I said, surprising myself as much as Griffin. His eyes locked with mine, searching. Finally, he nodded once. "Stay if you must, but do not interfere." I moved to the corner of the room, out of the way, but unwilling to leave. Part of me was terrified of what I might witness, but another part needed to understand exactly what kind of world I was being pulled into, the brutality on both sides. The tracker began to stir, his eyelids fluttering open to reveal startlingly blue eyes. They widened in fear as he registered Griffin standing over him. "Where are the others?" Griffin demanded without preamble. The man's lips thinned stubbornly. In response, Griffin placed one clawed hand on the man's wounded chest, not applying pressure yet, but the threat was clear. "Don't," I said, stepping forward despite myself. "There must be another way." Griffin didn't look at me. "This is war, Clara. Has been for centuries. There is no gentle path." The tracker's gaze darted to me, confusion evident. "You're human," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "For now," I replied. Something like recognition dawned in his eyes. "You're one of the marked ones, not turned yet." He strained against his bonds. "Don't let them change you. You can still be saved." Griffin growled, a sound so primal it sent shivers down my spine. "She doesn't need saving from us." His claws extended further. "Last chance. Where are the others?" The tracker's eyes never left mine. "The main force camps at the river crossing, a half-day's march from here. 30 soldiers led by Commander Vincent. They'll be here by nightfall tomorrow." His expression became urgent. "Run while you can. During the change, you'll be vulnerable. They know where the settlement is. They'll burn it to the ground." Griffin snarled. "How? How did they find us?" A pained smile touched the tracker's lips. "Your pet humans in the village. The ones you returned. They left a trail even a blind man could follow." My thoughts flew to Mia and the Davis twins. Had they somehow led the hunters here, unwittingly or otherwise? Griffin's expression hardened. "Sarah, gather the war council. We move the pack immediately." He glanced at me. "The change will happen tonight, ready or not. We can't risk waiting." As Sarah rushed out, the tracker spoke again, his eyes still fixed on me. "What's your name?" I hesitated, then answered, "Clara." "I'm Thomas." He swallowed painfully. "Clara, listen to me. They don't tell the marked ones the whole truth. The change, it doesn't just transform your body. It changes who you are, what you value. Your humanity gets buried under the wolf." "Lies," Griffin growled. "We remain ourselves, just freed from human weakness, human blindness." Thomas ignored him. "They need your bloodline to strengthen theirs. They're using you." Griffin grabbed the man by the throat, cutting off his words. "Enough." "Stop," I cried, grabbing Griffin's arm. "He's helpless. Bound." Griffin's burning gaze turned to me, his face contorted with fury barely held in check. For a moment, I thought he might strike me down. Then, with visible effort, he released Thomas and stepped back. "See to our preparations," he ordered the remaining guards. "I'll deal with the prisoner." When they had gone, he turned to me. "You think me cruel," he said, his voice low. "A monster." "I think you're fighting a war," I replied carefully. "But I'm not a soldier, Griffin. I'm a healer." I can't watch you torture someone, enemy or not. And if his information saves our pack? Saves you? His eyes searched mine. Would my cruelty be worth it then? I had no answer for that. He stepped closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I have watched over you for 2 years, Clara Blackwood. Kept you safe when purifiers passed through your village, hunting for any sign of the old blood. I have killed to protect you, and I would do it again without hesitation. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Judge me if you must, but understand what we face. The intensity in his gaze made it difficult to breathe. What will you do with him? I asked, nodding toward Thomas. Take him with us. He may have more information we need. Griffin's expression softened slightly. I won't kill a bound man in cold blood, despite what you may think of me. Relief washed through me. Thank you. He seemed surprised by my gratitude. Don't thank me yet. Tonight you face the change, and it will be the hardest battle you've ever fought. He reached out slowly, as if giving me time to pull away, and touched my cheek with the back of his hand, the claws now retracted, leaving only warm, human skin. But you won't face it alone, I promise you that. The touch sent a jolt through me like lightning, leaving my skin tingling and my heart racing. Before I could respond, he turned away, issuing orders to the pack members who had begun to gather outside. I remained in the infirmary with Thomas, unsure of my place in the sudden flurry of activity. The tracker watched me warily. Why are you still here? He asked. You could run now, while they're distracted. I shook my head. And go where? The hunters would find me just as easily. We could protect you, he offered. The purifiers would welcome you, help you resist the change. The same purifiers who are coming to slaughter an entire pack? Who might harm innocent villagers? I shook my head again. I don't think I want their kind of protection. Thomas sighed. They're not all zealots. Some of us just want to keep the human world safe. Safe from people like my grandmother? I challenged. From Mia and the Davis twins? From me? You don't understand the danger. He strained against his bonds. When the bloodlust takes over, even the most controlled werewolf becomes a killing machine. I've seen entire families torn apart because one member turned. I thought of the pack outside, how they had moved with controlled grace even in their wolf forms, how they cared for their wounded, how Griffin led with harsh but undeniable justice. Perhaps what you've seen are the desperate ones, the ones driven to extremes by being hunted. A pretty thought, Thomas replied, but naive. Ask your alpha what happens to werewolves who lose control. Ask him about the culling. Before I could question him further, my grandmother entered the infirmary. Clara, come. We must prepare you for tonight. With a last glance at Thomas, I followed her outside. The settlement was in controlled chaos. Pack members dismantling structures, packing supplies, preparing to move deeper into the forest territory. Where will we go? I asked as she led me toward her own cabin. There's an ancient site in the heart of the forest, sacred ground where the change is strongest. She began gathering various herbs and tinctures. The first turnings happened there, centuries ago. The power in the earth will help ease your transition. And what if I don't want to transition? The question that had been burning in my mind finally escaped. My grandmother's hands stilled. She looked at me with infinite sadness. Then you will die, Clara. The blood has already awakened. If you fight the change now, it will tear you apart from within. Fear clutched at my throat. There must be another way. The purifiers would tell you they can suppress it with their potions and rituals. She shook her head. But that path leads only to madness and a slower death. I've seen it. So I have no choice after all. She took my hands in hers. We always have choices, my little wolf. But sometimes, all our choices are difficult ones. She pressed a small vial into my palm. This will help with the pain when it begins. The rest is up to your own strength. As the day progressed, the tension in the settlement grew palpable. By mid-afternoon, most of the structures had been packed onto wagons or carried by the stronger pack members. Griffin moved through it all like a shadow, issuing commands, ensuring every detail was managed. Mia found me as I helped load supplies. She looked radiant, her transformation having settled into her bones in a way that made her movements flow like water. You're afraid, she said. Not a question, but an observation. Wouldn't you be? I replied, tying down a bundle of furs. She smiled. I was terrified, but then her eyes took on a dreamy quality. It was like breaking the surface after being underwater your whole life. Suddenly everything is brighter, clearer. You can finally breathe. And the pain? Her smile faltered slightly. It's intense, but brief. And the pack helps. They surround you, lend you strength. She squeezed my shoulder. I'll be with you tonight. We all will. As the sun began its descent, Griffin gathered everyone in the clearing. The pack had been reduced to what could be carried. The rest would be retrieved later if possible. Thomas had been secured on one of the wagons, still bound but treated well enough. We move now, Griffin announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. 2 hours' journey to the sacred grounds. The change begins at moonrise. His eyes found mine in the crowd. Those undergoing the change will travel with their designated guardians. The rest form a perimeter guard. My grandmother appeared at my side. I'll be with you, she assured me. As will Griffin. Griffin? I didn't bother hiding my surprise. Doesn't the Alpha have more important duties? Something like amusement flickered in her eyes. Ordinarily, yes, but your bloodline is special, and Griffin has claimed the right to guide you through the change himself. Claimed? Don't I have a say in this? You can reject his presence if that's what you wish. Her expression grew serious, but having the pack's strongest wolf guide, you significantly increases your chances of survival. The change is not just physical, it's spiritual. Your wolf will need an anchor, someone to call you back if you lose yourself in the transformation. Before I could respond, Griffin approached us. He had changed into simple dark clothing that emphasized his powerful build. The authority he carried was unmistakable, not just in his bearing, but in the way others instinctively gave way before him. It's time, he said, his amber eyes searching mine. Are you ready? No, I wanted to say. I'll never be ready for this. Instead, I straightened my spine and met his gaze steadily. As ready as I can be, something like approval flickered across his features. He offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I took it. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and in that moment of contact, the strangest sense of rightness washed over me, as if some part of me had been waiting for precisely this touch. Stay close, he murmured. The journey will be swift. As the pack moved out in ordered groups, I found myself flanked by Griffin on one side and my grandmother on the other. Mia and several other young wolves who had recently undergone the change followed close behind, forming a protective circle. We plunged deeper into the forest than I had ever ventured before. The trees grew older, more massive, their ancient trunks twisted into shapes that seemed almost deliberate. The light changed, filtered through countless layers of leaves, until it took on a greenish-gold quality that made everything look slightly otherworldly. We're crossing into the old forest now, my grandmother explained softly. Few humans have ever seen these trees. Griffin maintained a punishing pace, yet somehow adjusted to my human limitations. When the terrain grew too difficult, he would lift me effortlessly over obstacles, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. The forest grew darker as the sun began to set. Wolves at the edges of our group shifted forms, running ahead as scouts and returning with quick reports. The tension among the pack was growing. I could almost taste it in the air, a metallic anticipation. The purifiers? I asked Griffin after one such report. Still at the river crossing, according to our scouts, but they're moving faster than expected. His jaw tightened. We'll reach the sacred grounds before them, but with little time to spare. The light was nearly gone when we finally emerged into a massive clearing dominated by an ancient stone circle. Weathered monoliths, easily twice the height of a man, stood in a perfect ring around a central altar stone. The ground within the circle was covered with moss that seemed to glow with faint, phosphorescent light. The Moon Gate, my grandmother whispered reverently. Oldest place in the forest. The boundary between worlds is thinnest here. The pack moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a perimeter and setting up a minimalist camp outside the stone circle. Those who would undergo the change tonight, myself and 2 others from distant packs who had journeyed to join us, were led to small tents to prepare. Inside my tent, my grandmother helped me change into a simple white shift. She painted symbols on my skin with a mixture that smelled of earth and crushed herbs, murmuring words in a language I didn't recognize. For protection, she explained. To help your spirit find its way back. Back from where? I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Her eyes met mine. The in-between. The moment of transformation takes you to the threshold between human and wolf. Some get lost there, unable to complete the journey in either direction. And that's when you die? She nodded solemnly. Your anchor will help guide you back. Listen for their voice when the darkness comes. She pressed her palm to my cheek. You are stronger than you know, my Clara. Blackwood women have always had steel in their spines and fire in their hearts. Outside, a horn sounded. A deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. It's time, my grandmother said softly. The moon rises. The moon rose like a silver eye opening over the ancient stone circle, its light striking the central altar with unnatural brightness. I stood at the edge of the circle, heart hammering against my ribs. As the pack formed a loose ring around the three of us, who would undergo the change tonight, my fellow initiates, a young man and woman from distant packs, looked as terrified as I felt. Like me, they wore simple white shifts marked with protective symbols. Unlike me, they had grown up knowing this moment would come. Griffin appeared at my side, his presence both comforting and terrifying. He'd removed his shirt, revealing a torso mapped with scars that told stories of battles survived. In the moonlight, his skin seemed to glow with an inner fire. Remember, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. When the pain comes, don't fight it. Move through it. Your body knows what to do even if your mind doesn't. What if I can't? I whispered, fear finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. His amber eyes held mine. You can. You will. He touched the wolf pendant at my throat. Your grandmother's bloodline is strong, and I will not let you get lost. A drum began to beat, slow and hypnotic, matching the rhythm of my heart. My grandmother stepped forward, now dressed in ceremonial robes that marked her as an elder. The hunter's moon rises, she intoned, her voice carrying across the clearing. The veil thins. The old blood awakens. The pack responded with a chorus of howls that raised goosebumps along my arms. Some began to shift forms, bones cracking and reforming as fur spread across their skin. The air filled with the wild, musky scent of wolf. Step forward. Children of the pact, my grandmother continued, come to the altar of your ancestors. On shaking legs, I followed the other initiates to the center of the stone circle. The altar gleamed in the moonlight, its surface etched with symbols similar to those painted on my skin. My grandmother approached each of us in turn, offering a wooden cup filled with a liquid that smelled of earth and blood and something unidentifiable. Drink, she instructed. Let the old magic prepare your body for what comes. The other initiates drank without hesitation. When my turn came, I took the cup with trembling hands, meeting my grandmother's eyes. She nodded encouragingly. The liquid burned like fire going down, spreading heat through my limbs until I felt feverish. The clearing seemed to blur around the edges, the moonlight intensifying until it was almost painful to behold. Kneel, my grandmother commanded, and we obeyed, forming a triangle around the altar stone. The drumbeat quickened. The wolves circled closer, their movements synchronized like a single organism. Griffin took position directly behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The change comes, my grandmother announced. Embrace it, or be destroyed by it. There is no middle path. The first spasm hit without warning, a violent contraction that bent me double. Pain lanced through my body, hot as molten metal. I bit back a scream, tasting blood where my teeth had sharpened without my knowledge, cutting into my lip. Don't fight it. Griffin's voice came from somewhere above me, steadying. Let it flow through you. Another wave of pain hit, stronger than the first. My bones felt like they were breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and re-knitting. I could no longer hold back my cries. Dimly, I heard the other initiates screaming too, their voices transforming into something wilder. The world dissolved into pure sensation. My skin burned as fur pushed through pores. My jaw elongated in agonizing increments. My spine reconfigured itself with sickening pops. Everything human in me was being unmade, burned away in the crucible of transformation. In the midst of the physical torment came something worse, a psychological fragmentation. Memories scattered like leaves in a storm. I couldn't remember my name, couldn't recall why I was fighting against this tide of primal energy that threatened to sweep away my identity. Darkness closed in, not the darkness of night, but something deeper, the void between forms. The liminal space my grandmother had warned of. I was neither human nor wolf, caught in between and unable to complete the journey in either direction. Panic clawed at what remained of my consciousness. Then, cutting through the darkness, came Griffin's voice. "Clara, come back to us. Follow my voice." Clara. That was my name. I clung to it like a lifeline. "You are stronger than this pain," he continued, and I felt his hands, or were they paws, on my shoulders, anchoring me to reality. "Your wolf is waiting. Don't fear her. She is you, and you are her." With monumental effort, I stopped fighting the transformation. Instead of resisting the fire in my veins, I surrendered to it, letting it consume me completely. The pain crested, then began to recede like a tide. In its place came new sensations, power coiling in muscles I hadn't possessed before, scents so complex and rich they formed a landscape of information. Sounds from miles away as clear as if spoken directly into my ear. I opened eyes that saw the world anew. Sharper, more vivid, with colors beyond my former human spectrum. Looking down, I saw paws where my hands had been, cream-colored fur with hints of gold. I was standing on 4 legs, my body completely transformed. The change had taken me. I had survived. Dazed, I looked around the circle. The other initiates had also completed their transformations. One a russet wolf, the other gray-brown. Griffin stood beside me in his human form, watching with undisguised pride. "She's beautiful," someone murmured from the circle of watchers. Griffin knelt beside me, his hand gently stroking the fur at my neck. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. I couldn't answer in words, but a rumble rose from my chest, not quite a growl, something more complex. Somehow he seemed to understand. "The first shift is the hardest," he said. "The shift back will come easier, but not tonight. Tonight, you run with the pack." He straightened and began his own transformation, the change flowing through him with practiced ease. Within moments, a massive black wolf stood where the man had been, his amber eyes the only feature that remained unchanged. The black wolf, Griffin, circled me once, then touched his muzzle to mine in what felt like both greeting and approval. The contact sent a jolt through my new body, awakening instincts I didn't yet understand. My grandmother approached, still in human form. "The second phase begins," she announced. "The run will strengthen your new forms, help you learn what you've become." Griffin raised his head and howled. A command, a call to action. The pack responded, voices blending in harmonic layers that stirred something primal within me. Without conscious decision, I joined them, my own voice finding its place in the chorus. Then we were running, bursting from the stone circle into the forest beyond. Griffin led, with me and the other new wolves directly behind him, the rest of the pack flowing around us like water. The sensation was indescribable. Power, freedom, belonging, all mingled into an intoxicating rush. My body knew what to do without thought. I leapt fallen logs, wove between trees, splashed across streams with perfect coordination. Scents told stories my human mind could never have interpreted. Which animals had passed, how long ago, whether they were afraid or hunting or mating. Sounds painted a 3-dimensional map of the forest, the rustle of a mouse 50 yards away, the wing beats of an owl overhead, the breathing of every wolf in the pack. We ran for what felt like hours, climbing higher into mountains I hadn't known existed. The night air grew colder, thinner, but my new body barely registered the change. The moon tracked across the sky, bathing the world in silver light that seemed almost solid enough to touch. Finally, we reached a high ridge overlooking a valley shrouded in mist. Griffin halted, and the pack gathered around him. From this vantage point, I could see lights in the far distance, the village where I had lived my entire human life, now impossibly remote in more ways than one. Griffin padded to my side, his massive form dwarfing mine. There was intelligence in his amber gaze, recognition, communication beyond words. I understood somehow that he was asking if I regretted the transformation, if I mourned what I had left behind. I looked again at the distant lights, searching my heart for the answer. I found sadness there, yes, for the simplicity lost, for the human connections broken, but regret? No. Whatever I had become, whatever challenges lay ahead, this felt right in a way nothing in my human life ever had. I had found my true form, my true pack. I pressed my muzzle briefly against Griffin's shoulder, a gesture that felt instinctively like gratitude, like acceptance. He responded with a gentle nip to my ear that sent warmth coursing through me. The moment was shattered by a high, urgent howl from behind us. We turned to see a scout racing toward our position, his posture communicating danger even before he reached us. The pack tensed as one organism, hackles rising. Griffin met the scout, and though no words were exchanged, information clearly passed between them. The alpha's posture changed instantly, becoming rigid with what I somehow knew was fury and alarm. He issued a series of short barks that sent the pack into immediate action. My grandmother, who had kept pace with us in her elderly wolf form, smaller and silver-gray, shifted back to human, her transformation smoother than any I had witnessed before. She approached me as the pack organized itself into defensive formations. "The purifiers have changed course," she explained, knowing I couldn't yet shift back to ask questions. "They're not at the river crossing. They're heading directly for the sacred grounds. They must have a tracker with them who sensed our magic." Her face was grim. "And they've split their forces. A second group is approaching from the north, trying to trap us between them." Griffin reappeared at my side, having shifted back to human form as well. "They're moving too quickly," he said, his voice taut with controlled rage. "They have vehicles on the old logging roads. They'll reach the sacred grounds before dawn. Our supplies," my grandmother said. "The wounded." "Serra is leading an escort back to protect them," Griffin replied. "But we're exposed here, and the new ones cannot shift back yet." His eyes met mine, filled with concern he didn't bother to hide. "They're vulnerable until they master both forms." "What do we do?" my grandmother asked, deferring to his leadership despite her status as an elder. Griffin's expression hardened into resolute determination. "We split up. You take Clara and the other new wolves north, deeper into pack territory where they'll be protected. I'll lead the warriors to intercept the purifiers before they reach the sacred grounds." My grandmother frowned. "You're dividing our strength. I'm protecting our future," Griffin countered, his gaze still locked with mine. "Clara and the others carry bloodlines we cannot afford to lose." I made a sound of protest, the closest I could come to objection in this form. The thought of Griffin facing the hunters without the full strength of the pack sent fear coursing through me, a fear that surprised me with its intensity. He seemed to understand. Kneeling beside me, he placed a hand on my head, fingers sinking into my fur. "I will find you," he promised, his voice low and fierce. "When this is done, I will find you. But you must go now. Stay safe." My grandmother placed her hand on his shoulder. "Be careful, Griffin. We've lost too many alphas to human weapons." A grim smile touched his lips, not this time. He rose to his full height. "The purifiers have hunted us for centuries. Tonight, they learn why that was always a mistake." The mountain forest blurred around us as we fled through the pre-dawn darkness. My grandmother led our small group, myself, the two other newly changed wolves, and a handful of protectors, deeper into pack territory. My wolf body moved tirelessly, leaping fallen trees and navigating steep ravines with instinctive grace. Yet my human mind remained troubled. Griffin was facing the hunters with only half the pack's strength. The knowledge gnawed at me, a splinter beneath my skin. We reached a hidden valley just as dawn's first gray light touched the eastern sky. Nestled among towering pines stood a cluster of stone cabins, weathered by time but sturdy, an emergency refuge, my grandmother explained after shifting back to human form. "Rest now," she told me, stroking my fur with gentle fingers. "The first shift back usually happens after sleep. Your body needs time to recover." Inside one of the cabins, I curled on a bed of furs, exhaustion finally overtaking worry. As I drifted toward sleep, I caught myself listening for distant sounds of battle, for howls that might indicate Griffin's fate. The last thought that crossed my mind was a prayer to whatever powers watched over wolves. Keep him safe. I dreamed of running beside a massive black wolf through moonlit forests that stretched forever. In the dream, we were perfectly matched, moving as mirror images of each other, neither leading nor following. When I looked into his amber eyes, I saw myself reflected there, not the hesitant human girl I'd been, but something wild and powerful and free. I woke to sunlight streaming through a small window, and the strange sensation of being back in human form. The transition had happened during sleep, just as my grandmother predicted. Every muscle ached with a deep, bone-tired fatigue, but beneath it ran a current of new strength, like a hidden river under ice. Clothes had been left beside the bed, simple garments of soft leather and woven fabric. As I dressed, I caught sight of my reflection in a small metal mirror hanging on the wall. My features looked the same, yet somehow different, sharper, more defined. My eyes had changed most noticeably, now containing flecks of amber where they had once been pure hazel. Outside, the small settlement was quiet. The other new wolves were still sleeping, but my grandmother sat by a fire pit in the center of the clearing, her face turned toward the forest as if listening. "Any news?" I asked, my voice rough from howling. She shook her head. "Not yet." Her eyes studied my face. "How do you feel?" "Strange," I admitted, sitting beside her. "Like I've shed a skin I didn't know was too tight." She smiled. "The first day after is always disorienting. You're balanced between two worlds now." "Will I change again tonight?" "No. Now that the change has taken hold, you control the shift. It might happen involuntarily during extreme emotion until you master it, but essentially, the wolf is yours to call or dismiss." I absorbed this, flexing my fingers and remembering how it felt to run on 4 paws instead of 2. "And Griffin? The others?" Her expression grew somber. "Still no word. But Griffin is the strongest alpha the Northern Pack has had in generations. Have faith in him." Hours passed with agonizing slowness. I paced the perimeter of the settlement, testing my new senses even in human form. My hearing reached far into the forest, catching the heartbeats of small animals hiding in the underbrush. Scents told stories. An elk had passed through at dawn. A bear had marked territory a mile east. Rain was coming from the north. Midday brought Thomas to the center of our small camp, escorted by 2 wolves who had been tasked with guarding him. Despite still being bound, the tracker looked better than when I'd last seen him. His wounds partially healed, his gait stronger. "How do you feel?" I asked as he was seated by the fire. He studied me with those startlingly blue eyes. "Different," he answered finally. "Your eyes have changed. So has the rest of me." I offered him water, which he accepted with bound hands. "I can sense it now," he said after drinking. "The wolf in you. It's like a heat signature only I can see." "That's how you find our kind? This sensing?" He nodded. "Some of us are born with the ability. The purifiers find us young, train us." A shadow crossed his face. "They don't give us much choice." "There's always a choice," I countered, thinking of the one that had been forced upon me, which now, strangely, didn't feel like a violation, but a homecoming. "Is there?" His gaze was challenging. "Ask your pack what happens to wolves who choose differently than the alpha commands." Before I could respond, a howl cut through the forest. A signal, not a hunting cry. Every wolf in the settlement froze, listening. A second howl answered, then a third. My grandmother's face lit with relief. "They're coming," she announced, "and they're not being pursued." The wolves appeared at the edge of the clearing within the hour, weary, some wounded, but alive. My eyes searched frantically among them for one particular form. I found Sarah first, limping slightly but moving with purpose. "The purifiers retreated," she reported as she reached us. "We destroyed their vehicles, took their weapons. They won't regroup easily. Casualties?" my grandmother asked. 3 wounded seriously, none lost." Sarah's eyes flicked to me. "The Alpha comes behind with the last patrol." He sent us ahead. Relief washed through me so powerfully my knees nearly buckled. Griffin was alive. The knowledge settled something wild and fearful that had been raging inside me since we'd separated. True to Sarah's word, Griffin arrived as the sun began its descent, leading a final group of warriors. Even from across the clearing, his presence hit me like a physical force. Our eyes locked, and the rest of the world seemed to recede. He crossed the distance between us with long, purposeful strides. Up close, I could see evidence of battle, a healing gash across his cheek, bruises darkening his knuckles, exhaustion lining his face. None of it diminished the raw power that emanated from him. "You're safe," he said, his voice rough with fatigue and what might have been emotion. "You're alive," I countered, surprising myself by reaching out to touch the wound on his face. He caught my hand, holding it against his cheek rather than pushing it away. The contact sent warmth spiraling through me. "I made you a promise," he said softly. "For my ears alone. I keep my promises, Clara." A throat cleared nearby. My grandmother stood watching us, her expression unreadable. "The pack needs addressing," she reminded Griffin gently. "They're waiting for their alpha." Griffin released my hand reluctantly. As he walked toward the center of the settlement, the scattered wolves gathered naturally around him, drawn to his authority like moths to flame. "The immediate danger has passed," he announced. "The purifiers have retreated to lick their wounds, but they will return. We've bought time, nothing more." Murmurs rippled through the gathered pack. Griffin raised a hand for silence. "We cannot return to our previous territory. It's compromised. We move north, to the high valleys, where the western pack once roamed before they were destroyed." His gaze swept the assembly. "It's harsh country, but defensible. We leave at first light tomorrow." As the meeting dispersed, I approached Thomas, who had watched the proceedings with wary attention. "What happens to me?" he asked quietly. It was a question I'd been pondering myself. "That depends," I answered, "on whether you're truly our enemy." His blue eyes searched mine. "I was raised to believe your kind are monsters. Dangerous. Uncontrollable." He hesitated. "But what I've seen here, it doesn't match what I was taught." "People rarely do," I said. "Wolf or human." Thomas glanced toward Griffin, who was deep in conversation with his lieutenants. "He'll never let me go. I know too much. Perhaps there's another option." The idea forming in my mind was audacious, possibly foolish, but it felt right. "You could stay, not as prisoner, but as liaison. Someone who understands both worlds." Surprise flashed across his face. "They would never accept me." "Maybe not immediately," I conceded. "But you said yourself, what you've seen doesn't match what you were taught. Perhaps the same could be true for them." I left him to consider this, making my way to where Griffin now stood alone, surveying the settlement with a leader's calculating gaze. "The tracker," he said before I could speak. "You've been talking to him." "He's not what I expected," I admitted. "I think he's questioning his purpose, his loyalties." Griffin's expression hardened. "Trackers don't change sides, Clara. Their hatred is bred into them from childhood." "Like the hatred of wolves is bred into humans?" I challenged. "I changed." "Why couldn't he?" His amber eyes studied me with new intensity. "You didn't change sides. You discovered your true nature. Maybe he could discover something too. Understanding. A different perspective." Griffin shook his head, but there was something like reluctant admiration in his gaze. "One day in the pack, and already you're challenging the alpha." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Your grandmother warned me you'd be trouble." "Is that why you watched over me for years?" I asked boldly. "Because you expected trouble?" The amusement faded from his expression, replaced by something deeper, more serious. "I watched over you because from the first moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. The same way the moon recognizes the tide." The simple honesty of his words stole my breath. "And now?" I whispered. "Now you're one of us, wolf and pack." His gaze intensified. "But what you become beyond that is your choice, Clara. I am alpha, but I don't command hearts." Understanding dawned. He was giving me space, freedom to find my place in this new world without pressure or expectation. The respect inherent in that gesture moved me more than any declaration could have. "And if my heart has already decided?" I asked, stepping closer. Something flared in his eyes. Hope, heat, hunger, quickly controlled. "Then I would say hearts sometimes move faster than minds are ready to follow. Give yourself time." Night fell over the small settlement. The pack gathered around fires, sharing meals and stories of the battle. I found myself welcomed among them not as outsider, but as one of their own. Mia sat beside me, her familiar presence a bridge between my old life and new. "You're different," she observed, studying me. "Stronger already. The wolf suits you." "Does it?" I wasn't entirely sure yet what I had become, how much of the human Clara remained. She nodded confidently. "You were always meant for this. I could sense it, even before I changed." Later, as the fires burned low and most of the pack sought rest, I wandered to the edge of the clearing, drawn by the silence of the forest and the brilliance of stars overhead. My new senses painted the night in shades of silver and blue, alive with subtle movements and sounds that would have been invisible to human perception. A presence approached behind me, familiar already, though I'd known him such a short time. I didn't turn as Griffin came to stand beside me. "Tomorrow we leave this place," he said quietly. "Begin a new chapter for the pack." "Are you afraid?" I asked, genuinely curious if the alpha ever felt the emotion that had been my constant companion these past days. "Always," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "Fear keeps a leader sharp, keeps him from growing complacent. But I don't let it rule me. I'm still afraid," I confessed. "Of what I've become, of what comes next." His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "The future is always uncertain, Clara. Wolf or human. The difference is, now you don't face it alone." In that moment, with the forest breathing around us and the moon rising silver above the trees, I knew I had made the right choice. Whatever challenges lay ahead, purifiers, the harsh northern territory, learning to balance human and wolf, I would face them with this pack, with him. I turned to face Griffin, reaching up to touch the healing wound on his cheek once more. This time, he leaned into the contact, eyes closing briefly. "You're not safe with me," he had warned when we first met. Perhaps that was true. Life with the pack would never be safe. But as his arms encircled me, drawing me against the solid warmth of his chest, I realized safety wasn't what I sought anymore. I had found something infinitely more valuable. Freedom, strength, belonging. And in the amber depths of the alpha's eyes, something that looked remarkably like